I think we have enough hit-and-run drivers on the highways without having a hit-and-run driver as governor of this state. Look at the tactics in the past few days. Charges and smears, and yet he refuses to meet me in man-to-man debate. I believe that the people of California want as governor a man that makes his own decisions, fights his own battles, and that is willing to meet his opponent in debate. And I say to you, don't pay any attention to the charges that are flying back and forth. Remember, it is your vote, it is your state. Vote for a greater California. I have been asked many times in the last few days how Californians should react to the Cuban crisis. Above everything else, we should not panic. There shouldn't be any runs on grocery stores or gas stations. We're going to have more crises in the future. And if Mr. Khrushchev thinks that every time he flexes his missiles, so to speak, that we're going to panic, it's just going to encourage him to press us again. What we need is calm courage at this time. And what we need above everything else is to step up our activities to inform all Californians, and particularly our young people, about how communism really acts, what it is in fact rather than in theory. That's why I propose a new program, a program of education, in which all of California's young people will be the best informed in the nation about the dangers of communism and the positive alternative of freedom. This is the Halloween season, and you would certainly know it if you were to listen to the speeches that are being made by my opponent and his supporters. A massive campaign of fear and smear, trying to frighten the voters of California into voting to re-elect them to the office that they presently hold. I say to you, consider the backgrounds of the candidates. Consider what we stand for. And don't vote on the basis of the charges and countercharges that are flying thick and fast. Vote for what you believe is a greater California. Progress for the first state in America.
Richard Nixon has served his country well, and I am certain that he can serve well the state of California. I have full faith in the man. I endorse him 100%.
Following brief ceremonies outside Malacanang Palace, Mr. Garcia accompanied the honored guests to where President and Mrs. Ramon Magsaysay awaited them. This, again, was more than a mere visit. It was a warm reunion between old friends. On the morning But now the moment for the greatest event had arrived. Over 500,000 people were gathered at Luneta Park when President and Mrs. Magsaysay joined ex-President Sergio Osmeña and Mr. and Mrs. Nixon to review a mammoth parade. This was the exuberant climax of the nationwide celebration of this 10th year of independence. In the 2-hour-long procession, more than 50 huge floats rolled by. They depicted Philippine progress in the past decade, and they pointed to the future goals of this country, a country that not so long ago was left crushed. Filipinos and Americans fought and died side by side. Malinta Tunnel was also toured by the leaders, who shared vivid impressions of its historic past. It was here that living quarters had been provided for the first Philippines president, Manuel Quezon. And it was here that Generals MacArthur and Wainwright planned their strategy. President Magsaysay arranged this trip at the request of Mr. Nixon, who wished to see for himself the hardships that the defenders of democracy had experienced. Next day, the Vice President's visit was tremendously heartening to the capital of nationalist China, as evidenced by the people's cheers. The next day, he conferred with President Chiang Kai-shek after giving him a letter from President Eisenhower, a letter that strongly reassured Free China's leader and his people of steadfast U.S. support in their stand against communism. With Mrs. Nixon and Madam Chiang, the two statesmen posed for news cameramen. Mr. Nixon summed up the content of their talks in a brief statement.
I just had a conference with President Chiang with regard to the relations between the government of the United States and the government of the Republic of China. And in this conference, we discussed the mutual problems and the mutual dangers which we confront in the world. The government of the United States and the people of the United States stand firmly with the government of the Republic of China and the people of the Republic of China against communist aggression in Asia and other parts of the world. As a result of this conference, I am sure that there will be no doubt in the minds of people around the world that our two countries and our two peoples stand together against the common danger which threatens free people around the world, the danger of communist imperial colonialism.
Riding back to the airport, the Vice President
American legend of a boy rising out of humble beginnings. His mother remembers the early years fondly, as a mother would.
First, from the time he was quite small, he loved the music. He could play most anything he heard when we were out. Oh, that was before he was even 7. Come home and he'd go over it on the piano. And then, right after he began taking lessons, he was an apt music pupil, and I thought perhaps he would be a good musician.
He grew up in Southern California, left there to go to law school, and then came home again.
At 9 o'clock the next morning, this young fellow from
and support that he should be the candidate.
And he was willing.
And he was willing.
The rest is a matter of record. In the congressional record, a speech against Gerhard Eisler, the Munt-Nixon bill regulating communist activities, the Alger Hiss case, then re-election to Congress, then election as a senator from California. Then, July 11th, 19...
That's what we have. That's what we owe. It isn't very much. But Pat and I have the satisfaction that every dime that we've got is... I should say this, that Pat doesn't have a mink coat. But she does have a respectable Republican cloth coat. And I always tell her that she'd look good in anything. One other thing I probably should tell you, because if I don't, they'll probably be saying this about me, too. We did get something a gift after the election. A man down in Texas heard Pat on the radio mention the fact that our 2 youngsters would like to have a dog. And believe it or not, the day before we left on this campaign trip, we got a message from the Union Station in Baltimore saying they had a package for us. We went down to get it. You know what it was? It was a little Cocker Spaniel dog in a crate that he'd sent all the way from Texas. Black and white, spotted. And our little girl, Tricia, the 6-year-old, named it Chucky. And you know, the kids, like all kids, love the dog. And I just want to say this right now, that regardless of what they say about it, we're going to keep it. It isn't easy to come before war. Why can't we have prosperity in Washington, D.C. at the same time? Believe me, we can. And Eisenhower is the man that can lead this crusade to bring us that kind of prosperity. And now, finally, I know that you wonder whether or not I am going to stay on the Republican ticket or resign. Let me say this. I don't believe that I ought to quit, because I'm not a quitter. And incidentally, Pat's not a quitter. After all, her name was Patricia Ryan, and she was born on St. Patrick's Day, and you know the Irish never quit. But the decision, my friends, is not mine. I would do nothing that would harm the possibilities of Dwight Eisenhower to become president of the United States. And for that reason, I am submitting to the Republican National Committee tonight through this television broadcast the decision which it is theirs to make. Let them decide whether my position on the ticket will help or hurt. And I'm going to ask you to help them decide. Wire and write the Republican National Committee whether you think I should stay on or whether I should get off. And whatever their decision is, I will abide by it. But just let me say this last word. Regardless of what happens, I'm going to continue this fight. I'm going to campaign up and down in America until we drive the crooks and the communists and those that defend them out of Washington. And remember, folks, Eisenhower is a great man, believe me. He's a great man. And a vote for Eisenhower is a vote for what's good for America.
The Republican Senatorial Committee and the Republican Congressional Committee.
This is Gunner Back of WFIL-TV in Philadelphia. Washington put on a homecoming Thursday, May the 15th, for the Nixons of the kind usually kept for returning war heroes and kings and queens. President Eisenhower was the key figure at National Airport around noon, and in a totally informal way, with a genuine show of affection, made it clear he was pleased with his vice president and wanted to make this his moment and occasion. Mrs. Nixon, her arms full of roses, watched with obvious pride. Mr. Eisenhower told the airport crowd, the cabinet, half of Congress, the Latin American diplomats, and hundreds of Washington College students were there, that the Nixons had been in real danger in South America, in risk of physical harm or worse. But the president drew this conclusion.
As one ambassador, one Latin American, said to me this morning, really, our whole situation, our situation of cooperation and brotherhood among ourselves, is strengthened because of the fact we stand together in condemning any kind of communist leadership of such incidents as endangered our beloved Vice President and his wife.
The vice president was much moved by the welcome in Washington. He said he is sure that the
observations in each one of the countries we visited that the great majority of the people, the great majority in all walks of life, are friendly to the United States today.
The Nixons rode from Washington National Airport to the White House in a cavalcade. Washington school children and government workers had been given a brief holiday to join in on the occasion. Secretary of State John Foster Dulles joined the President and the Nixons at lunch to hear Mr. Nixon's first-hand report. The Vice President today, in his airport remarks, spoke with deep feeling at returning to American soil, land of freedom where citizenship is such a priceless thing, where governments stay stable, whether they be of one of our parties.
Taxpayers of my state and of the nation? No. No good American believes that a public servant should charge political expenses to the taxpayer. And just let me say this. I am proud of the fact that during the 6 years that I have been in the House of Representatives and in the Senate of the United States, I have never charged to the taxpayers any political expenses. I am proud of the fact that during the time that I've been in the United States Senate, that a group of those who supported me when I ran for the United States Senate financially have continued to pay all the political expenses, and that is this $16,000 that some of my opponents are trying to make something out of. They've continued to pay those political expenses after I went to the United States Senate, and after I think under the circumstances that the taxpayers of America will be thankful that they paid it rather than the taxpayers. And I'm mighty proud of the fact that they did, because I don't believe the taxpayers ought to be imposed upon as much as they are at the present time. I've got to talk to the people, and they can catch me. Pat and I just want you to know that it's wonderful to get back and to get this welcome from our friends. We want you to know that we've appreciated tremendously the thousands of wires, and they've been that have come from all over the country, and particularly those that have come from the people that we know. We know that this is a time when you find out who your friends are. And we're glad to know that our friends are sticking with us, and we just want you to know also that we won't let you down.
We thought you would be interested in the number of phone calls that have been received by the committee, the wires, the results from the conferences held on the phone between members of our staff, people in the field last night, and the reaction as we see it today across the country to Senator Nixon's speech last night. During the period of time between 10 o'clock and 2, we received approximately 4,000 phone calls through our board. The wires that we have received, and these are a part of them, we think are about 20,000. The Western Union people tell us they have delivered more than that, and we think that a good share of the 20,000 are here.
I want to express on behalf of Mrs. Nixon, Pat, and myself our deep appreciation for the wonderful expression of confidence after our radio and television broadcast. I wish it were possible for us to answer each of your letters and telegrams individually, but due to the number, we're unable to do so at this time. We want you to know, however, that we shall do everything in our power not to let you down. And now I'd like to say a word to the young people of America, to those of you who might have thought that you might go into public service. Don't get the idea that it isn't worth it because of what you have to go through. Because believe me, the compensations far outweigh the drawbacks. You always have the satisfaction of knowing that you're doing what you think is right, and of knowing that whenever you are under attack, all you have to do is to go before the American people and tell the truth.
We had a very harmonious meeting with the President. He went over the various subjects that are in his, to be covered in his State of the Union message, which he will give next Monday to the Congress. We discussed, frankly and freely, all of the matters that he brought up, and I think we can all say that it was a very satisfactory discussion.
toward the east, where a new light is falling on the dark continent. Down near the equator, the Gold Coast was about to emerge from a long period of dependency. The handwriting on the wall of Africa having written the constitution of a new democracy, Ghana. Its Prime Minister Nkrumah was educated in America about our concepts of individual dignity and freedom. Representatives of 70 nations gathered here with the citizens of Ghana to join. Dick Nixon left a feeling of friendship with the United States that they had never had before. From Africa's newest nation to one of the oldest in the world, Ethiopia, and a conference with Emperor Haile Selassie. And on across the deserts to the North African countries where the same events seen in Asia.
And then to, the other thing I wish to do is this. I am sure that many are listening here who are supporting Mr. Senator Kennedy. I know, too, that he probably is listening to this program. And while the... Please, just a minute. And as I look at the board here, while there are still some results still to come in, if the present trend continues, if Mr. Kennedy, Senator Kennedy, will be the next President of the United States. Excuse me.
leadership to the whole world, which will produce a world in which all men can have what we have in the United States: freedom, independence, the right to live in peace with our neighbors. And so with that, may I say again my thanks to you. Having had only 2 hours sleep last night and 2 hours sleep the night before, I'm now going to bed, and I hope you do too. Thank you.
So Vice President Richard Nixon is going to bed tonight on this election night without conceding the election to his Democratic rival, Senator John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He came as close as a man can, but did not actually concede. He said that if the present trend continues, Senator Kennedy will be the next president of the United States, but that could hardly qualify as a concession at this time. He is going to bed without conceding the election. He did congratulate Senator Kennedy for his fine race in the campaign, and obviously his attitude was one of concession. You saw Mrs. Nixon almost break into tears there. There obviously is